Come on in. Get comfortable. I want to introduce you to someone that you may not know very much about. Have you ever been treated unfairly? People made erroneous accusations about you. You were rejected. Then maybe you were abandoned. You're also abused, maligned, forgotten. What did you do? How did you behave when all that happened? Were you resentful? Did you bear a grudge? Maybe you succumbed to bitterness. That's what I'd do. But here comes a story that's full of patience and it's full of purity. Do you want to hear it? It's found in the Bible, Genesis 37:18. I'll read these words. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming in the distance, before he even reached them, they plotted to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they said to each other. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into this cistern and say that a ferocious animal had devoured him. Have you ever hated anybody that much to do what I just read? How long did it last? What were the side effects of your hatred? Can you remember? Joseph's brothers, they had sown seeds of hatred. And that hatred became seeds that grew, and those seeds got planted, and it lodged right down deep in their heart. The watering can for those seeds to germinate was selfishness and jealousy. And those seeds sprung up into fruit. And that fruit said, let's kill him. Let's get rid of him. When they saw Joseph coming in the distance, what was about his coming that they recognized? Was it his swagger? Carefree, happy-go-lucky? Remember, he's only 17 years old. Was it his good looks? Maybe. Maybe they saw that bright coat of many colors that his dad had given him. They never got one, but he did. One of the brothers probably shouted to the rest of them, hey, take a look at that. Look what's coming. Their hatred reached a boiling point. Do you know what that tells me? Class, hatred doesn't need a reason. All it takes is an opportunity. That nasty weed called hatred has already germinated, and now it's time to pluck it. This story is full of intrigue. Do you think Joseph is going to die? Two of his brothers, Reuben and Judah, they're going to step up and they're going to do something very strange because it's going to rescue him. And I'm going to let you take a look over my shoulder and take a look at how that happened. I'm not quite sure what their motives were. Maybe you can help me figure it out as I describe it. Verse 21. When Reuben heard, he tried to rescue Joseph from their hands. Let's not take his life, he said. Don't shed any blood. Throw him down here in this cistern in the middle of the desert, but don't lay a hand on him. Reuben said this to rescue him from them and then take him back to his father. Now remember, Reuben was the oldest of the 12 brothers. Something in his head told him, this isn't right. We can't be doing this. We can't kill him. He probably thought about his dad and his dad's feelings. He knew Joseph was a spoiled brat, and that fueled jealousy and hatred, but not to kill him. He was the only child of Rebekah, Jacob's wife, the one he loved with all his heart. And those feelings ran deep. We can't kill the boy. Do you think there's something else going on maybe in this story that we don't see and it doesn't quite meet the eye? I want you to think about something. An incident in Reuben's past may have triggered his motives. I'll tell you about it. Reuben did something really stupid. Did you ever do anything stupid? Well, he did. It's recorded in the 35th chapter of Genesis. His mother, whose name was Leah, had a slave girl. And the slave girl's name was Bilhah. She did all the household work. Jacob, his dad, was told by Leah, now look, I've given you enough kids. If you want any more, you're going to have them with my concubine. I'm going to give this woman to you as a concubine. Her name is Bilhah. I'm done having more kids. You can have them with her. Those are my ideas, but I think that's what it went. And he did. But you know what Reuben did? He got an idea that he could do it too. So he raped Bilhah. He had an affair with her. And old Jacob, his dad, he never let on a word that he knew anything about it. But we do know that his dad held this in the bottom of his soul until he died, because just before he died, when you get to the tail end of Genesis, he's reading his will. And remember, Reuben is the oldest child, and he's going to get the birthright. His dad told him, you're not getting it because of what you did. So it did really affect his dad. Some biblical scholars, they think that Reuben's compassion to save his brother Joseph was nothing more than his conscience bothering him. He wanted to win back his dad's favor because his dad, he kind of thought, knew what had gone on with Bilhah and him. He had ideas, I think, of coming to that cistern when the other boys, his brothers, were sleeping in the night, and he was going to haul Joseph up out of that cistern and sneak off and bring him back to his dad and tell him what happened. And he did it probably to win favor with his dad. Maybe his dad would forgive him for his bad behavior with Bilhah. Not sure. Just an idea. We do know this. When Joseph disappeared from the cistern, he wasn't around. Reuben wasn't. We'll come to that in a minute. But in verse 29 of the 37th chapter of Genesis, it says that Reuben blew his cork. When Reuben returned to the cistern and he saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes and he went back to his brothers and they said, the boy isn't there. Where is he? He's gone. Are you beginning to sense that something is coming that the brothers and Joseph know nothing about? In the midst of all this jealousy and all this cruelty and all this deceit and all this game playing and all this getting even and all this spiritual darkness, do you think God's hand is in the midst of all of this? Do you want to know how hard-hearted these brothers were? After they had stripped him of his robe, sunk him down in that well in the middle of the desert, do you know what they did? It says this in verse 25. They sat down and they ate their meal. How ugly is that? After tearing off his coat, beating him up, putting him down the well, they just said, oh, good, we'll have a meal. So they sat down and had their supper. Joseph must have been mesmerized, beat up, stripped off his coat by his brothers, lowered in that dry, dusty old well, so deep you couldn't get out. The well floor had skeletons of animals, no doubt, that fell in and couldn't get out. They were dead. They were just the skeletons. He knew he was going to be a skeleton too. He's going to die down there. Dehydration, starvation, in the middle of the desert. He could yell all he wants. Nobody's going to hear him. What did the brothers do? It says they sat down together and they ate a meal. They finally rewarded themselves for their hatred and they got even. I want you to be Joseph for a minute. What do you think's going on in his head? Terror, confusion, complete rejection, 17 years old. His whole life flashes in front of him. I'm going to die, I bet he thought. My life is ending. My whole existence on this earth is going to come to a halt right down here in the bottom of this dry well. I told you that two of Joseph's brothers were going to step up. Well, that was the one. That was Reuben. He stepped up. Now I'm going to tell you the other one, Judah. He steps up. Verse 25. The brothers looked up and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, with balm, with myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. How convenient. Judah, he saw all this, and he got a brainwave. Verse 26. Judah said to his brothers, what will we gain if we kill our brother? And then we cover up his blood. Come on, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay a hand on him. After all, he is our brother. He's our own flesh and blood. The brothers all agreed. Do you know what just happened? Joseph's sentence, his sentence, was just commuted from the death penalty to slavery. He's going to live. Do you think that's good? Maybe it's bad. Pretend that you don't know the tail end of this story. What will we gain if we kill our brothers and cover up his blood? Let's sell him. Verse 28. So when the Midianites, the merchants, came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and they sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites who took him down to Egypt. Well, look at that. They each got 2 shekels for their youngest brother, because remember, there's 10 of them. Suddenly it was all over. Joseph was gone. Their conscience was healed. Their hatred was paid for. They could go home. Uh-oh. One more thing. What about their dad? What are they going to tell him? Jacob has to find out. What's going to happen here? Verse 31. Then they got Joseph's robe. They slaughtered a goat, and they dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornamental robe back to their father, and they said, we found this. Examine it. See whether it's your son's robe. What I just read, those 10 brothers buried it for 20 years. And class, you can't commit one sin and think you're going to get away with it. When you commit one sin, it follows that you need another sin to cover up the first one. And every time this event came up, I think, in the minds of these brothers, what other sin did they commit to hide the first one? You just know. Those brothers were asked over and over again, whatever happened to your younger brother Joseph? Wow, how ugly. How many embellishments did they lie to hide their guilt? I'll bet there were lots. We live in a world of lies. You see it all around you. We see it every day. We see it in the marketplace. You see it in the schools and the teachers. You see it in the politics. You see lies in the sports. You see lies in Hollywood. It's in the military. You see it in the blue collar. You see it in the white collar. You find it even in the palace and in the White House. It's everywhere. It's a virus that sneaks in the back door. 2 or 3 blocks from where I went to seminary, there was a nice old church called Avenue Road Church. Do you know who the pastor of that church was? His name was A.W. Tozer. He made a comment that kind of fits what I'm just saying. Here's what he said. It's doubtful that God ever used anybody greatly without hurting him deeply. Do you think Joseph was hurt? What about his brothers? Were they hurt? Do you think their dad was hurt? When you sinned, were you hurt? Verse 33. When Jacob recognized the robe, he said, "It's my son's robe. It's Joseph's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured my son. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Joseph tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and he mourned for his son many days. And he refused to be comforted. He didn't want anything to eat. "No," he said, "in mourning I will go down to the grave to see my son." That's how hurt that father was of that boy. It's doubtful that God ever used anybody greatly without hurting him deeply. When Joseph was handcuffed and coming out of that cistern, placed on a camel, heading to Egypt to live a life of slavery, do you think he had thoughts of God? "Lord, what are you doing to me?" Have you ever felt that way? Do you think Joseph had in mind Psalm 27, verse 13? "I am still confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living." Do you think Joseph felt that? He had just endured his brother's hatred. But his brother Reuben and Judah had saved his life. Do you think that was luck? The Ishmaelite caravan coming at the right time? And it just happened that there'd be a nice deep cistern in the middle of the desert? Do you think that was all luck? And then this 17-year-old, what's going on in his mind? Chapter 37 doesn't give us a lot of detail, but it's all there. It's doubtful that God ever used anybody greatly without first hurting him deeply. This whole chapter is about hurt. Nobody's left out. And you're not left out either. Many of you are hurting just listening to me talk because you're beginning to see a parallel between what happened to him and what's going on in you. Here's a little comfort. If you're in God's will, you're in the middle of a storm. And often you're in the middle of hurt. Do you think you're being hurt deeply is going to remove you out of God's will? And then it's going to be calm? It's not like that. Remember what Isaiah said of Jesus. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. Isaiah 53:10. He was first hurt deeply, and then salvation came. So did yours. Do you know what I've learned from this chapter? Like Joseph, things don't always turn out the way I think they should. There's hatred. There's jealousy. There are garments torn off. There's deep cisterns. There's Ishmaelites. There's 20 silver shekels. There's slavery. There's famine. It's coming. But class, so is salvation. And don't get easily fooled, because you can get fooled. It was the reading of the will and testament of Ralph Boone. Ralph Boone, when he died, asked his lawyer to read his will to his family. And they all gathered together, and here's what he read. To my son Sam, I'm going to give you the Ocean Reef houses. To my daughter Sybil, You take the apartments that are between 8 Mile and 7 Mile Road. Jamie, my son, I'd like you to take the offices in the Marathon Government Center. Sarah, my daughter, please take all the residential buildings on the bay side of the Blackwater Sound. In hearing this, the nurse couldn't believe her ears because she didn't think Ralph had very much. And she said to all those listening, I can't believe it. This man had accumulated so much property. The wife spoke up and said, no, it's not what you think. What you just heard was Ralph giving away his paper route. You're going to face some stiff trials before God's going to use you. Don't try to shun them. If you do, you'll probably miss his blessing. Tender hearts, I have found, come from nights of tears. Stiff trials are coming into Joseph's life. Next week, I want you all back here because I'm going to tell you what those trials are. And together, we're going to learn from them. So I'm counting on you to come back. See you then.